Okay, so today the mood just struck me that I want to talk about Nintendo remakes, just in a general sense. And what is a remake? I guess, a quick recap. I think that a remake can either be something like Metroid Zero Mission or something as accurate as Super Mario RPG. I don't consider Metroid Zero Mission a reimagining. I would consider Donkey Kong Country a reimagining of the Donkey Kong IP. So take that for what you will. I know that people will always disagree on that. I'll have a link in the video description about all of my thoughts on that stuff. I almost said crap. It doesn't matter. Anyways, so Nintendo remakes, right? Recently, we've seen Luigi's Mansion 2, Mario vs. Donkey Kong, Super Mario RPG, a remaster of Metroid Prime, I guess you're supposed to call it a remake of Paper Mario and the Thousand Year Door. Now, what are my thoughts on all these? I think that some of these are really good choices. I think some of them are very bizarre choices. But I recently had a conversation with Proton John, and it kind of enlightened me to the idea of why we're seeing remakes of certain games that, in my opinion, don't make a ton of sense, like Luigi's Mansion 2 and Mario vs. Donkey Kong. It's because the original developers are able to work on these remakes, which to me is still kind of not great. I mean, I think these are talented people. You should probably put them on something like Donkey Kong 94. You got Mario vs. Donkey Kong, which is heavily based upon Donkey Kong 94, the Game Boy game. So it would just make a ton of sense to just throw them on a remake of Donkey Kong 94, which, I'm sorry, it's all subjective and it's everybody's opinion, but if we're going to ask my personal opinion here, I think Donkey Kong 94 is leagues above Mario vs. Donkey Kong, and it certainly would benefit far greater from a remake than Mario vs. Donkey Kong, not just on the fact of quality, but also the fact of age. That game is just monochromatic, and even though there's that Super Game Boy adaptation that can make the colors a little bit better and give you some voice samples and stuff, it still could obviously be awesome on a Nintendo Switch with updated graphics. So I'm already on the topic of basically why I want to even make this video. I'm trying to think of Nintendo games that I would prefer to see remakes of. I would love to see a remake of the one I just mentioned, as well as Super Metroid is one of those games that is the greatest of all time. If you go back to it, though, if you really loved the gameplay of Metroid Dread, it can be a little bit, I guess, polarizing to do the combat in Super Metroid. There's just a little bit more of a floatiness, a little bit more of a stiffness, a heaviness to Samus. I guess floatiness and heaviness is sort of contradictory of one another, but you got to play the game to kind of understand what I'm talking about here. Back then on the Super Nintendo, this was amazing. It was so much better than it was on the Game Boy or the original NES, and it still holds up. I just want to make that clear. It certainly only takes about 5 to 10 minutes to readapt to Super Metroid's way of playing combat, but in my opinion, there's no way around it. I feel like Metroid Dread's combat is infinitely better than Super Metroid's. But I also would say that the tone and atmosphere of Super Metroid is the best that the series has ever had. It has this close to horror themed Metroid game, and I would say that Metroid Dread definitely goes close to that direction. It just goes in a different direction, and so it's sort of like your favorite flavor of ice cream, I guess, at that point. But for me, my favorite flavor of ice cream is Super Metroid, and so I want to see that come back, but with better combat, maybe a slightly changed or remixed Planet Zebes. That would be cool, so that way returning fans don't have to know exactly where to go. They can sort of navigate the planet in an all new way, so that way it does kind of makes sense to make this game as opposed to just playing the original Super Metroid. So that's something that I would absolutely adore to see. I would also love to see a remake of Ocarina of Time, if for no other reason than the graphics on both the 3DS and obviously the Nintendo 64 are a bit dated at this point, and I do think that Ocarina of Time is one of those incredibly important and special games in Nintendo's history that really does deserve annual releases so that modern audiences can constantly appreciate it. For me, what would I like to see in a Ocarina of Time remake? I would love to see Twilight Princess combat with the helm splitter and all those other moves that you can learn, as well as more involved combat from the enemies that we saw from Twilight Princess. I'm gonna have a clip thrown up here. Bloops, please show them that one clip with the flying enemy. That one is a great clip to kind of showcase how much better Twilight Princess's combat can be than Ocarina of Time. And, again, in my personal opinion, I find it to be more satisfying than the loosey-goosiness of something like Breath of the Wild. But, you know, people that fully utilize Breath of the Wild's combat would completely disagree, and I know that's the case. I just am one of those people that just is lazy-brained, and I need something a little more linear to my combat in order to enjoy it to its fullest. So anyways, that would be like 3 really good choices for me in terms of remakes. If there was anything that I would want to just see like with just a graphical polish and brought back, you know, maybe Pikmin 1 and 2. I know that we just recently got a port, like an HD port of those 2 games, and that's fine. They're not entirely ugly games, but like it's still, Pikmin is one of those franchises that would greatly benefit from like 4K resolution. I know that we're not there yet. I know that the best that we could possibly get is 1080p on the Switch. Oh, Kid Icarus Uprising would be another one that I feel like all it would need is just a little bit of graphical shine, and obviously controls mapped to a Joy-Con. That would be great as well. So that would be another great, just sort of like Luigi's Mansion 2 styled remake. So a couple of things I do want to say about the remakes that are coming out soon. I do think that Super Mario RPG was a great choice for the style of remake that they went with. It is just an amazing game at the end of the day, and I really did just feel like the only thing that was dated was its graphics because of how it utilized CRT TVs back then. But just making it look almost like a one-to-one remake of the original game, but with 3D graphics, was smart. I thought that was validated. Paper Mario and the Thousand Year Door is one that I feel like is not as necessary. I see that they definitely remodeled some 3D environments and stuff like that. I do want to make this clear. Based off of what I'm seeing, I think that this is definitely a remaster. So people calling it a remake, I think is maybe overshooting the scope of this project. But I do think that it's a remaster that has gone through the trouble, for whatever reason, of remodeling all the 3D models and retexturing all the in-game sprites and stuff like that. I guess you would call it a sprite at that point. So, like, as far as how necessary that was, I don't think it was entirely necessary. I think you just need to, like, sharpen some of the old sprites, and you could have left the environments generally the same and just make it 1080p, and you could have made it a less expensive package. But I do want to make sure I make this abundantly clear. If you've never played the Thousand Year Door, or it's been decades since you played the Thousand Year Door, I would ask you to purchase this game out of support for the RPG genre of the Paper Mario series. That is definitely something that's been kind of a hot button issue amongst Paper Mario fans, is that the developers think that we need to move away from the traditional RPG elements, and this is finally an opportunity for you to buy the game and show Nintendo, like, no, we do want this. So although I have my criticisms, I still at the end of the day think that, like, this is like an important release that you should support, and you will have a good time by supporting it. Like, playing the Thousand Year Door is a fantastic game. It's a fantastic time. So Luigi's Mansion 2, on the other hand, is one of those ones where it's like, I feel like it got a ton in sales because we hadn't seen a sequel to Luigi's Mansion up to that point. And so it was very exciting, and the 3DS had a very large install base, and so the excitement got a lot of people to buy Luigi's Mansion 2, and so the sales skyrocketed for that game. And I love that for the series, because then we got Luigi's Mansion 3 out of it, and that game is one of the greatest Switch games of all time. I would argue that it might be in my top 5 Switch games of all time. However, Luigi's Mansion 2 definitely crawled so that Luigi's Mansion 3 could run, and to re-release this game with a remaster coat, it just I don't see the point. Like, I guess, like, if you're excited for it, awesome, I'm excited for you. Please enjoy the game. Not telling anybody not to buy any of this stuff. I think that's weirdly authoritarian when we get down to opinions here, but like, yeah, I mean, if we're just having an honest conversation about it, that's one of the ones where I'm like, you know. But to summarize, I'm excited about Nintendo's excitement towards remakes and remasters now. I do think that on the whole, Nintendo is sort of picking really good choices as far as what games should get remastered or remade. I guess my one criticism that I would summarize here is that you don't have to just get the same teams on the same games that made those games. I think that it would be valid and honestly worthy to get some of these very talented people on different game projects, even if it does mean that the development might be a little bit longer, a little bit more strained, because they have to reverse engineer a game project they didn't work on. I think at the end of the day, we can get a lot more exciting games remastered and remade, and I hope to see that in the future, especially the ones that I mentioned here. This isn't just engagement baiting. I do read all the comments on this third channel, so if you have any suggestions for what Nintendo should remake or remaster, please let me know, because I would love to hear it as a fellow Nintendo fan. I just love the conversation. All right, take care.